Hi guys, today I will be reading Pasquala Chapter 4. It's called Thunder in the Earth. Early that summer I took my first trip to the seashore. I was 8 summers old. Many of the people in our village made the annual trip to the ocean to collect and dry enough shellfish to last our village for 1 year. The night before we left on our journey, everyone was busy packing supplies. It would be a long trip to the seashore, and everyone had to help carry his own share. The women packed belongings the women packed belongings and food into large cone-shaped burden baskets. I helped my mother fill her baskets with loop sticks, stirring paddles, digging sticks, small baskets, skins for bedding, seeds, acorn, and tule meal. When we finished, Mother's basket was filled to the top. I watched Father as he packed his carrying net. He selected his best obsidian blades, bone hooks, stone tools, fishing weights, small nets, and drilling sticks for starting cooking fires. I helped him tie the net closed. Before we went to sleep that night, Father gave me a small leather pouch with a long strap. It was filled with seeds and pieces of dried meat, and was my very own carrying pouch. The next morning Father helped Mother lift the heavily loaded burden basket filled with other belongings onto her back. Father slipped one end of a strong woven tump line around her basket and the other end of the tump line over Mother's forehead. Mother wore a brimless basket cap on her head to protect her forehead from the pull of the scratchy tump line. Father lifted his heavy net onto his back and tied it with a strap around his chest. He carried his cedar bow and raccoon skin quiver over his shoulder. Mother and Father wore tule sandals, but I wore my deerskin moccasins. I hung my pouch over my shoulder, and together the three of us joined the other people of our tribe to start our long journey to the seashore. Father said it would take 6 days and nights to reach the ocean. He said we would leave our village by the lake and travel westward through many hills and valleys. Our group started happily along the trail that led west to the mountain passes. Several of the village dogs followed close at our heels, yipping and barking excitedly. They raced ahead and then ran back to us as if to tell us, "Hurry along." The dogs seemed as eager to go to the seashore as we were. As we traveled westward across the marshlands and down the sloughs thick with tules, we could see great herds of brown tule elk in the distance. Our footsteps disturbed many birds, and great flocks of red-winged blackbirds flew up from the marshes, darkening the skies over our heads. Walking single file, our group moved swiftly across the valley and into the first range of hills. Moving up into the rolling hills, we left the heavy heat of the valley behind us. As we looked back into the valley below, we could see the vast green and brown patches of tules that covered the valley floor. Father pointed to our little village near the shores of the great blue lake. We could see wisps of smoke rising from the cooking fires in our village. Far, far to the east, we could see the tall mountains with the last patches of snow clinging to their highest peaks. We wound our way upward and over the range of hills. Late that afternoon we came down through a pass in the hills to the valley. We camped near the mouth of a river, and Father said that we would follow the river for the next few days. By the time I had awakened the next morning, the men had speared trout and the women had gathered baskets of watercress for our meal. That day, as we followed the river, we passed through groves of oak trees where our tribe gathered acorns in the fall. Golden flowers bloomed along the riverbanks, and clouds cast dark shadows on the mountains in front of us. In the next few days we would be climbing those tall mountains covered with pine forests. The night we camped in an abandoned Chumash village. Mother told me that when the Chumash had lived in this valley, we would not have come into their territory without their permission. We would have followed another trail to the sea. There was sadness in my heart as I wondered why the Chumash people had left this beautiful valley. Several days later, we climbed the path into the pine forests. Never before had I smelled the fragrance of the pine trees. I was used to the smell of the marshes and the sloughs in the valley of the tules. As we walked swiftly along the trail, I heard the scolding of the blue jays in the pines. I wanted to chase the chipmunks as they scurried up and down the tree trunks, but Mother warned me to stay on the path close by her side. There was the danger of bears in the pine forest, and I noticed that other children in the group stayed close to the adults. Each day, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains and the day slowly darkened into night, our group would find a place to rest. Several cook fires were started, and women would prepare the evening meal for the men, women, and children who had come on the trip. After sharing the meal, the women and children gathered pine needles to make beds to sleep upon. One evening, after we finished a light meal of dried meat and chia seeds, my father told us that it would be 2 more days of hard travel before we reached the seashore. The next morning, as we climbed higher into the pine forest, I noticed that the chipmunks had disappeared and the chatter of the blue jays could no longer be heard. The dogs that had come with us on the trip began to whine and whimper. Suddenly, the ground began to shake as if a thunderstorm was raging deep down inside the center of the earth. The earth shook and it seemed as if the ground was about to split open. Right in front of us, an old pine tree trembled and began to sway slowly back and forth. I stood frozen, unable to move as the large tree started to give way. Mother snatched me by the arm and pulled me off the path as the pine tree crashed to the ground. The noise of the pine tree's crash echoed back and forth into the canyons below us. The ground gave one last great shake as the thundering noise inside the earth died away. Then all was quiet. A loud shout from one of the men at the head of the group took us running to look at the giant crack in the earth. I clung to my father's side as we stood looking down into the deep opening in the ground. Would I be able to see the center of the earth where the thunderstorm had raged? All I could see was darkness far down in the crack. The men and the woman looked at each other, and an elder of the tribe motioned with his hand that everyone should sit down. No one spoke. We waited until the sun was straight overhead, and then the elder motioned that we would continue our journey. We gathered our baskets and packs and started again on our journey to the sea.